Pokemon as a franchise has never been particularly concerned with evolution, ironically enough. While every entry is more smooth and polished than the last, Pokemon has never been a series to shake up its formula or think outside the box. Although this is likely because any attempts to change the base formula of a game would cause hordes of screaming fans to come clawing at the walls of Nintendo HQ like a pride of hungry lions coming to devour a naive college intern. Even now, as Nintendo stubbornly clings to the tropes of the past in an attempt to please the fans, Pokemon games continue to lose goodwill. Pokemon Sword and Shield has been one of the most poorly received games in the franchise, causing millions of aggravated fans to cry in outrage as their beloved series is torn asunder. Little do they realize that the lovely cruise ship that is Pokemon has been sinking for quite some time now, and only now is the water starting to soil their shoes. Pokemon has relied on nostalgia alone for decades now, little realizing that the well will eventually dry up and that the series will eventually have to innovate and make new strides if it wants to survive. Removing the national dex was a start, I suppose. I know that's one of the main reasons that the game gets shot down by long-standing fans, but it made sense to me. After all, why keep remodeling and rebalancing all those Pokemon if most of them are never going to see the light of day anyway? You can complain all you want about not being able to transfer your old team to the new game, but if you really want to stick to your old team, then just play the old games for crying out loud. If we're still talking about innovations, though, perhaps Nintendo could start by making a half-decent story for a Pokemon game for once, but we get ahead of ourselves. The main problem with Pokemon is that it's easier than beating your neglected children. While the battling system of these games is simultaneously simplistic and deep and truly deserves a great degree of praise, that same battling system can't be properly explored if the player isn't challenged. Pokemon trainers in this series have never provided enough resistance, and this problem has only grown more pronounced with time. The fact that most trainers don't switch up their tactics, use items, or have full parties makes me think that I am the only person in this entire region who hasn't had their brain replaced with cooked pasta. The only times you're going to find trainers who know what they're doing is when you face the gym leaders, and arguably not even then. If you've been doing any kind of exploring in the wild areas, your team is likely so overleveled that your attacks will instantly reduce any opponent to a brightly colored smear on the stadium floor. And if you want to become even more overpowered, the new Dynamaxing mechanic can certainly deliver. In certain predetermined battles, you can Dynamax your Pokemon and basically turn them into kaiju. This increases their stats, sometimes changes their forms, and is a great method of demonstrating your penis envy if you can't afford a big enough truck. Some of you smart chaps in the audience might be thinking, isn't this just Mega Evolution? And to those of you in the back, congratulations, you are officially smarter than a game designer at Nintendo. Dynamaxing offers very little that's different from Mega Evolution, and is arguably worse because it only lasts 3 turns. One major difference, however, is the inclusion of so-called max moves, which take all your normal moves and turn them into superpowered laser beams. Now some of you intelligent whippersnappers might be pondering, isn't that just the same as Z moves? Well, congratulations, you beautiful darlings, you have once again proven your big brain energy to those weird introverts at Nintendo. Oh, but wait, max moves offer secondary effects in addition to their base damage, like the rock move, Max Rockfall, that starts a sandstorm when it hits, and the flying move, Max Airstream, that increases your team's speed. This is all well and good, but these benefits hardly matter unless you're playing competitively. That speed boost probably doesn't matter much against an opponent that has already been atomized. Dynamaxing can certainly give you the upper hand in a battle, but at this point in the game you likely have more upper hand than a college frat boy waiting for a high five that'll never come. Now Dynamaxing is all well and good, but another new addition to the series is wild areas, because now apparently every game needs to be an open world. This wouldn't even be so much of a problem if the wild areas weren't so painfully generic and uninteresting to explore. Not only are the standard routes completely bland, with only 1 entrance and 1 exit and 0 opportunity for exploration, but the wild areas mostly consist of flat terrain randomly interspersed with patches of grass and Dynamax layers, which are areas you can fight Dynamaxed Pokemon in for a huge experience boost. Speaking of which, it is quite easy to become ridiculously overpowered by doing a small amount of exploring in these wild areas. Fighting Dynamax Pokemon not only gives you an enormous amount of base experience, but it also gives you candies that you can use to give your Pokemon even more experience. If you're only sticking with one team, you'll very quickly find yourself pummeling every opponent until they resemble the trampled remains of a lost child on Black Friday. Even the gym leaders, supposedly the biggest challenges in the game, will weep with terror as you eviscerate their teams until nothing remains but cartoonish piles of paste. The gym leaders are a part of the so-called gym challenge that your Wonder Bread main character must undergo. Just like in most of the previous games, the protagonist must defeat all 8 gym leaders and then face off against the champion so that they may be known as one of the best dogfighters in the world. This is your one and only driving motivation throughout the entire game, and everyone just kind of assumes that's what you want to do with your life. Well, maybe I don't want to be the champion. Maybe I'd rather be a janitor and use the magical powers of my broomstick Pokemon to sweep up all these crushed dreams of mine. But no, we're kind of just stuck with be the champion or turn off the game and do something productive with your life. Not that I'm complaining, mind you. I suppose any motivation is better than no motivation at all, but it feels weird since we play as a mostly silent protagonist that everyone just kind of talks around. This silence is especially obnoxious when your stupid rival won't let you cross a bridge until he inevitably loses a Pokemon battle against you because he's a massive sucker. This leads us to another problem that Nintendo seems quite fit to ignore, the fact that their characters are as stiff and lifeless as a post-mortem erection. Pokemon Sun and Moon tried to remedy this with interesting and likable characters, and only partially succeeded. Lily was at least a generally likable character who went through a change, despite that change happening basically over the course of an afternoon. Where Sun and Moon failed was in the story that wouldn't get out of the way of the gameplay. Going back and playing Sun and Moon is always a chore because the game takes 30 minutes to get started and I have better things to be doing with my time, like eating excessive amounts of junk food and crying myself to sleep. While Sword and Shield doesn't have this particular problem, its story is just as predictable as ever, if not more so. Geez, this rich, successful CEO of a majorly influential company who takes a personal interest in our career as a Pokemon trainer couldn't possibly be the villain. I bet he won't be anything like the rich, successful CEOs that turned out to be the villains in the last two games. Needless to say that Seneca Crane from Hunger Games over here turns out to be the big bad guy. His big plan in this game is to summon a giant all-powerful monster and then turn it into a limitless energy source. This, of course, is much easier than just hooking up a few of the thousands of electric-type Pokemon to a big battery and then taking an early lunch. Seriously, if there's any fictional universe going through an energy crisis, I wouldn't think it would be the Pokemon world, for God's sake. Still, while Pokemon does fall tremendously flat in terms of story, one thing that they nailed in this game is aesthetic. Turning competitive Pokemon battling into a sport makes perfect sense, and having major battles take place in enormous stadiums can really get you excited. It totally makes you forget about all the fan riots that are likely happening outside because your Jigglypuff used Protect instead of Sing. Here's a friendly reminder that all people who watch sports are complete lunatics. Regardless, the stadium aesthetic of Pokemon Sword and Shield is gratifying to look at and sets the stage well for the Pokemon battles to come, no matter how trivial they may be. Aesthetic alone can't save a game, however, and Pokemon Sword and Shield's failures far outweigh its few innovations. Not only does the game fail to bring anything significant to the Pokemon formula, but it also continues the trend of lazy storytelling, static characters, and gameplay that a toddler with a concussion could easily get through. For the Switch's first Pokemon title, this game doesn't step up from its predecessors and seems content to keep going through the motions. While many fans dislike the game because of the removal of the National Dex, many look past the problems that have been weighing down the Pokemon series for years, and have only grown worse with each installment. If the story's uninteresting and the gameplay isn't challenging enough to keep the player engaged, then boredom will swiftly set in. If Pokemon wants to continue being one of the top dogs of video game franchises, then it's going to need to do something to remedy itself before it falls by the wayside. This has been Tyladin. Thank you so much for watching.